Do you know how a few sessions ago I was not so good at negotiations? Well, the players decided that they were going to make me negotiate with myself. When last we left our heroes, the players had just recently vanquished the dragon Vutharvith, protecting the town of Fenlock from all of the mosquitoes and making deals with the hag, Auntie Agatha, and that is where they sort of found, okay, now we know that there's a tree spirit, a dryad, a lady of the wood who is responsible for the dying trees. Let's go and speak with this lady of the wood and see if we can get her to change her mind, because we sure would like to help out the town of Glennon, because they're going to be in real trouble if they can't have sort of their primary industry up and running. Players travel back to Glennon. They check in with various people. Oh, it's been a little while since we've seen you. We weren't sure when we'd see you again. It's so great to be here. Oh, the heroes of Glennon. That was a fun sort of trumpeting their return was really cool. So they gather some information, they talk to some different people. Who knows about this? You know, is there a tree spirit anywhere? How do we find them? All these things. There's apparently somebody who has had an encounter with them, but everybody laughed it off. And so they have an idea of where to find this lady of the wood, and they go and speak with Eleanor Toppin and say, listen, lady, you got to come with us because a deal has to be struck. You want your trees back. I'm sure this thing wants something in return, and we don't have the power to negotiate. You got to come with us because we're not going to play messenger back and forth. Put your big girl pants on, come into the dangerous woods, and help us make a deal. And so, sort of backed into a corner, Ellie Toppin says, fine, sure, and the group and a couple other NPCs to sort of guard them and lead the way, head into the forest and try to find this lady of the wood. And this was really cool because one of the characters, Hildorn, the Fey-wandering ranger, has had some interactions with and experience with the Feywild, and dryads are incredibly Fey creatures, and so he was sort of taking the lead and trying to track this creature, and it was really cool sort of relying on Chris a little bit to describe some more things. I've gotten really, really comfortable giving this group of players some narrative freedom and control to say, hey, what does it look like? What does this thing sound like? You as a character, Hildorn, know more about dryads than I, Nick, a resident of Earth, do, so I'm gonna make you tell me about dryads and various things. And it's really cool because it gives the players some agency, some narrative control, some investment to say, oh, okay, and I just make up things, and that's part of my world now. And so it's really cool because it gives them a bit of narrative freedom and control and involvement in the process. It's not me talking at them and telling them the story and telling them about the world. It's us creating a cool thing together. I still have the overwhelming majority of narrative control and agency in my world, but I like to give things to players as little bits of freedom. I remember that was a lesson I took early on from Matt Colville. When there was a dwarven wedding, he turned to the dwarven player and said, hey, what's a dwarf wedding like in my setting? I don't know, you tell me, what's a dwarf wedding like? And that sort of thing I think is really cool to give players narrative freedom. And so I was doing that with, how do you track this dryad? How does it move, and what's it going to look like, and all those things. And so that when the dryad appears, that player had a sense of like, yeah, I saw that coming, because their character would have. And so the dryad shows up and starts to have a bit of a conversation, and they start to go back and forth about, okay, you want this and I want that, and this is why you've done this thing. Okay, how do we come to some sort of a compromise? And what was really interesting is I wasn't expecting the players to press gang Ellie Toppin into coming with them. I was expecting the players to make a deal, bring it back to Toppin, and she would have to sort of say yes, because those are the only terms. But the players said, cool, Ellie Toppin, why don't you talk to this druid? And what that means is, hey, Nick, why don't you talk to this Nick? And that's always really, really awkward when you have two NPCs talking to each other. But it's fun when you can you lean into it and you role play both of them as best as you can, but it's weird to have your players sit there and watch you talk to yourself. Definitely one of the stranger interactions as a DM, and I try to do it as little as possible, but it definitely came up here. It was also weird because it was making a deal, and so it was me making a deal with myself. I knew that I would make terms that I would accept. And so I had to do the best that I could to get in the headspace of both the Dryad and Ellie Toppin and switch back and forth between them so that they would be creating terms to the deal that they liked and agreed to, and agreeing or not agreeing based on who they are and what they value. And that was really interesting, but also incredibly difficult to take Ellie Toppin's hat off and put the Dryad's hat on and say, like, do I agree to those terms that I just proposed to me? Ugh, confusing. So they went back and forth for a little while, but eventually came to the terms of, you can harvest trees that are this mature, that have grown this much, so that the forest can have sort of some sustainability to it. You need to let my, tree shepherds go wherever they want. Because I imagine, I don't know, like little tree spirits, like not quite full-on dryads, like powerful dryads, but like little things can go and sort of tend to the woods. So you can't ever harm any of my tree spirits or my tree shepherds. You can only take full-grown mature trees and only things north of this river. So there's a boundary. You cross south of the river, you take trees that are too young, you ever harm a tree spirit, like we have real problems. And so Ellie Toppin's like, well, I don't want the little baby trees anyway. I was sort of clearing it because everything is easier that way, but sure, I guess we'll just clear the big trees, and everyone is sort of a win-win for everybody. It's slightly less profitable for Ellie, and there's some tree death for the Dryads, so they're both sort of not thrilled with the outcome, but they recognize that this is sort of a necessary compromise. And they come to terms and sign a deal, and this was a really cool moment because Jimmy, playing Bria the Bard, jumped in and she says, hey, I'm going to certify this. I'm going to write it up on a piece of parchment. I'm going to write up a contract. You're both going to sign it. And this was sort of Jimmy taking some more narrative freedom with the role that bards play in the setting of observing and certifying that events happened as everyone says they happened. And so that was a really cool sort of moment and interaction, a chance for him to play a bard not only as a character class, but as a character in the world, an archetype in the world. What's the role of a bard or a knight or something like that in the world, as opposed to what are the mechanics laid out in the player's handbook. And so I thought that was a really cool initiative that he took. He jumped in and sort of made a contract happen. Oh, I almost forgot. A really funny interaction was the Dryad said, okay, here, my opening offer, like, how do we make a deal? And Ellie Toppin is like, yeah, how much money is it going to cost to get you to change your mind? And that got all the players laughing pretty hysterically, because, like, who's going to, pay money to a Dryad? And some of them challenged me on, hey, is that realistic, or that doesn't make any sense. Nobody looking at a Dryad is going to try to pay them money. And I was like, well, hang on a second. Think about Ellie Toppin. Think about who she is. She's a high society kind of person. Every time she's ever encountered a problem, she's been able to pay enough money and make that problem not a problem anymore. Whatever the obstacle is, if you could put enough money at it, then you can make that problem go away in the circles that Ellie has grown up in and developed in and seen and heard about and all these things. And so, no, she's not familiar with, myths and legends and fairy tales. She's familiar with money and business and cash and bribes and, hiring people. This is how she solves problems. And so, of course, in her sort of nervous state, encountering a really powerful, cool-looking Dryad, she defaults to the only thing that she's known to ever 100% of the time work, money. And so that was sort of a challenge to the veracity of the world, and I doubled down and said, no, I think that this is realistic to how the world works. And so it was interesting, a conversation that the players and I had. Anyways, the players have sort of made their deal and everyone's headed back to their respective camps, and on the way, Ellie says, okay, I'm glad that you were able to help me negotiate that out. Obviously, it was, worse than it could have been, but better than it could have been, so thanks for that. Hey, do you want to be sort of retained by our company? Like, if you're solving problems, we could hire you. And this was me sort of seeing if the players wanted to be tied to somebody or if they wanted to be hand-fed quests, and to no degree of surprise for me, this is exactly what I expect the players to do. They said, absolutely not. You suck, and we don't want to work for you or be beholden to you. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I thought the players would say. So that little interaction done, the players sort of made their peace with everybody in the town. They talked to some people, and in this, they obviously went back to the wizard Ezra. They had some items that they wanted to get identified from the dragon's lair and various things that they had found, interacted with, and just check up on some things. Did he know anything about hag magic, stuff like that. And so in this interaction, Phaedra, oh gosh, this was nuts. Phaedra decided to say, hey man, do you want to come with us? Because we go off and do cool adventures, and everybody in town makes fun of you behind your back, and it would be cool if you were a cooler wizard. And I think after having spoken with the player, what he sort of meant to convey was that everyone around here says you're not that powerful a wizard, and it would be cool if you were a more powerful wizard. You could be more helpful to us and to the town, and when we travel, we gain experience and get more powerful. So do you want to come hang out with us, and maybe we can find somebody for you to study under, that sort of thing. But what was conveyed was, because this character has like 8 charisma and is terrible at this, what was conveyed was, everyone in your hometown, all of your family and friends, hate you and talk about you behind your back. And the only way to get them to stop is if you were a cooler wizard. And that's what was conveyed and internalized. And so this person goes, oh shoot, I guess I have no reason to live here anymore if everyone doesn't like me and gossips about me and hates me. So, I mean, what you've described sounds cool because, again, Phaedra didn't tell them the whole story about, we're killing dragons and stuff. We just said, yeah, we travel, we talk to people, we help fix some problems, we have some conversations with bad people, and that's it. And so he didn't scare off Ezra with the terrifying life of an adventurer. So Ezra says, sure, let me get my stuff and I'll come with you. And this is one of the closest things I've ever come to having a DM PC. I generally don't like that practice. And here's, okay, I got to give a chunk on DM PC because I think it is used wrongly much of the time. Definitionally, I think a DM PC is a really poorly played NPC. I don't know that a DM PC even really can exist because the DM is not the same as a player. DM's not a player. DM can't have a player character. They're just NPCs and PCs. And a DM PC comes about when a DM takes an NPC, forces them into the party, either from the start or not, because they wish they could play this character, and then they shine the spotlight on this character, they give them all the coolest stuff, they have all the solutions to every puzzle and problem, and they're the star of the show, they're the chosen one, all of these problems. I hate that. I think it's toxic. I've never heard of or seen that style of DM PC work. That being said, an NPC traveling with the party, not at all a big deal. I think there's a lot of people who have a chip on their shoulder about DM PCs and say, no, you should never have an NPC traveling with the party, fighting alongside them for anything longer than like one session. They can never do that because then it's a DM PC. I don't think that's true. I think it's just an NPC who's hanging out with the party for a while. I've seen it work lots and lots of times. I've done it a couple times. It sounds like this was not intentional on my part at all, but the party sort of recruited this wizard. And I think it'll be interesting because then the wizard can play kind of a utility role. It'll be sort of a team mascot in some ways because he's a little weaker than the players are. And also able to sort of round out the party's action economy. There's only 3 characters in the party, and so having another person is just going to help out in combats and things like that. So that's my chunk on DM PCs, but they sort of recruited this NPC and then said, cool, we're going to go to Riften, which is the seat of the Duke, and we're going to hang out and have a conversation there and see what we know. We need to report some information to some people. We need to see if we can pick up more quests and information. We want to see if there's a wizard that can train Ezra. Let's go to Riften. So the players set back out on the road once again. They're traveling, having some conversations back and forth with Ezra, who's getting more and more a part of the group. And he's this like really nervous, shaky, bookworm, wizardy character. So it's really fun getting to roleplay that and you know, talk to everybody and all those sorts of things. We travel, and on the road, the players are sort of traveling through a forest, and they hear a commotion up ahead of them, and they see briefly a group of centaurs escorting a unicorn through the woods, and they're like, whoa, that's cool, what's going on? And everyone notices everyone, and the centaurs say to themselves, sort of like, let's get the unicorn out of here. They drop the name of the unicorn, Starfall. Let's get Starfall out of here. Some of us will stay back and make sure that nobody is alive to witness her, and they have to try to kill the party. And so this is sort of me dropping in, hey, there's a unicorn in the area, and this unicorn is protected and is important enough that it needs to be kept secret because there are creatures willing to die to protect the knowledge of this creature existing. And so there's a little skirmish, a little fight there, and the players are sort of trying to figure out what do we do with this information? Do we tell anybody? I don't know. Let's get to Riften. We'll sort of see what's up. They finally arrive in Riften to get the lay of the city and grab a room for the night. And their plan next time is to do kind of a big shopping episode. Riften is where Lady Valancourt is, Bria's patron. So Bria needs to bring back all the stories she has written and gathered and heard since, you know, leaving Lady Valancourt for the first time, and so she's going to get some information. Hildorn is also trying to deliver a letter to the Duke to let him know what the heck is going on at the wall, and so there's just a bunch happening next week. Probably not much combat, but a lot of very interesting inflection points and different conversations that need to get had. So thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time.